start with the beginning with our first hero. Not Moses, but his mother Yocheved. As the Jewish people face slavery and extreme hardships under the bitter rule of Pharaoh, Yocheved takes a huge risk to save her family and the Jewish people. The pharaoh of the time, possibly Ramses II, who ruled from 1290 to 1223 BCE, decides that the Jewish slaves have become too numerous and mighty and makes a decree to reduce their population. Sounds uncomfortably familiar. He orders that every Jewish newborn male be immediately killed and cast into the river. Yocheved is a new mother and decides to hide her newborn son to prevent his murder. But after 3 months, she can no longer hide him quietly. She chooses to risk everything and send her infant down the river in a basket. As baby Moses floats down the river in his mother's homemade ark, Miriam quietly watches over him. The baby is finally discovered by none other than Pharaoh's daughter, who takes pity on the child. She lifts him from the river and names him Moses. At once, Miriam takes initiative and reveals herself. She asks if Pharaoh's daughter would like a Hebrew nurse for a child, and when the princess agrees, Miriam brings forth her own mother, Yocheved.
Now, it's important for us when we look at this story. It sounds poetic, it seems really nice and powerful, and it is a good story, but it's important for you to see the humanity of Moses in this. This is a man who doesn't fit in anywhere. He was born a Hebrew, but he was raised in the palace of Egypt. If you talk about a struggle, a conflict within for his true identity, it is found in the person of Moses. He didn't fit in with the Hebrews because he was raised in the house of Pharaoh. And he really didn't fit in Egypt because he had Hebrew blood coursing through his veins. Moses didn't fit in anywhere. There was a conflict within his identity. And as we see the life of Moses unfold, we see that at the age of 40, Moses kills an Egyptian slave driver as he oppresses a Hebrew slave. In his anger and in his rage, he lashes out and kills this Egyptian slave driver, causing Moses to flee into exile into the remote wilderness of Sinai's peninsula.
When forced to confront the tension between his life as an Egyptian prince and his life as a Jew, Moses makes the choice to defend the latter. This one act of courage disrupts Moses' entire life in Egypt and changes the course of his future. Moses sets up shop in Midian, where he marries a woman named Zipporah and has a son named Gershom. The Jewish people are still toiling under the back-breaking labor of Pharaoh, and God has bigger plans for Moses. While Moses is herding his sheep one day, God speaks to him through the flames of a burning bush. It is here that God reveals the larger plan for Moses to return to Egypt and start a revolution, free the Jewish people, and lead them to the promised land in Israel. And in this moment at the burning bush, Moses begins his journey as the exemplar of Jewish leadership by protesting God's request.
I don't know about you, if God would show up in my life and give me some exacts like that, I think I would feel okay doing it. I think. I turned the corner and went into Exodus chapter 4. That I was so stunned by Moses' responses after, in light of chapter 3, what God had given to him. Because we would like to say to God, if you would give me all of the information up front, I would do what you asked me to do, and I would go where you asked me to go, and I would be brave, and I would have no doubt and no fear because I would be sure, God, can you give me just a little bit more information? Well, we have someone who had all of the information, and he was still struggling.
Exodus chapter 3, verse 10. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. But Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you. This is the sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. Verse 13, but Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and I tell them that the God of your ancestors sent me to you, they will ask, what is his name? And what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you.
He heads back to Egypt with some miracles in his pocket, family on his side. At this point, there's a new pharaoh in town, most likely Merneptah, who ruled after Ramses in 1223 BCE. God knows it'll take more than a small miracle to set the Hebrew slaves free, and through Moses, God inflicts 10 plagues onto the Egyptian population. But time and again, Pharaoh refuses to let the Jews go. The Jewish people belong to him, and no amount of divine intervention can sway him, even as his civilization suffers massive destruction. That is, until the 10th and final plague, death of the firstborn. Moses warns the Jewish people about the final plague. He tells every family to slaughter a lamb and put the blood on their doorpost as a symbol for God to pass over their homes, which, spoiler, is how the Jewish holiday of Passover got its name. God passes over every marked home so none of the Jewish firstborns are killed. But Pharaoh is not so lucky. His son is among the thousands of Egyptians to die. Pharaoh can't take any more, and he finally agrees to let the Jewish people go. The children of Israel flee, but as soon as they leave, surprise! Pharaoh changes his mind again and chases after them. With Egyptian chariots on their heels, the Jewish people come to a dead end at the Sea of Reeds. It's a nail-biting scene. God tells Moses to place his staff over the sea, and suddenly, the waters part. The people cross the 10 miles, yes, 10 miles, it was no walk in the park or so, on foot, and as soon as they reach the shore, they turn around to see the walls of water falling down behind them, drowning Pharaoh's entire army in the sea. The Jewish people have officially made it. They are free from Egypt and destined to travel to the Holy Land. Moses bravely leads the children of Israel out of slavery and is immediately rewarded with complaints. From bitter water to lack of food, there is no shortage of grievances. Moses speaks to God, who answers the people with miracles, sending water from rocks and bread from the sky. The journey through the desert is not an easy one. For 3 months, the Jewish people travel under Moses' leadership and God's guiding hand. Finally, they reach Mount Sinai, where God fulfills the promise made to Abraham centuries earlier to create a great nation in the land of Israel. God's gift of the Bible at Mount Sinai is both wondrous and terrifying. God tells the people to purify and cleanse themselves in preparation, and that no one should touch the mountain lest they die. On the 3rd day, God descends over the mountain with thunder, lightning, and smoke. The sound of a ram's horn grows louder as the nation approaches the base of the mountain. Finally, God speaks to the Jewish people directly and gives them the 10 Commandments. When Moses returns back down the mountain, he finds the people worshiping a pagan god in the form of a golden calf. Seeing that his people are clearly not ready, Moses throws down the 2 tablets in his hand, shattering the holy words of God into pieces. He sets back up the mountain to ask God for forgiveness and repeat the entire process over again. The people accept these new tablets, along with the full 613 commandments. All at once, they receive a prophecy of their mission: to serve God, to serve man, and to be a light unto the nations. Thus, the children of Israel finally become the chosen people. The Jews have been freed, have received the Bible from God, and are officially a nation on its way to Israel. This is all true, with the addition of a slight detour in the desert for 40 years. Why? Why indeed. Well, with Moses now in his early 80s, he is preparing the people for the Holy Land they're about to conquer. He sends spies into Canaan to scope out the country and pump up the people for a land flowing with milk and honey. But the spies return with a negative report. They say the land is filled with enemies and giants and is too dangerous to conquer. The people complain once again, begging God to let them return to Egypt. Yes, the torture and throw your sons into the river Egypt. Two brave souls step up among the spies, Joshua and Caleb. They try to convince the people that God will help them prevail. But the damage is done, and God sentences the nation of Israel to wander the desert for 40 years. Now, only the next generation will earn entrance to the Promised Land, while the current generation is forced to live out the remainder of their lives in the desert. As harsh as it might sound, the journey through the desert helps shape the Jewish people into a nation, giving them a spiritual focus that prepared them for the Promised Land. Here, God commands Moses to speak to a rock and provide water for the people. Instead, Moses hits the rock. God responds by denying Moses the right to enter the Promised Land himself. God promises to show him the land from afar, but Moses does not live to see the children of Israel enter the land of Israel. Moses dies at the ripe old age of 120. But even though Moses' story ends, the story of the Jewish people is just beginning, as both Jews and non-Jews sing out, "Let my people go." From Egypt to Queen Esther to Judah the Maccabee, all the way to Martin Luther King Jr., Moses has inspired oppressed people throughout the centuries in what was, perhaps, the world's first liberation movement.
Every one of us can identify with Moses in his insecurities. Anybody ever identify with Moses? You know that God's called you to do something great, but all you can see is your weakness. Anybody, can I get a witness? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You know God has more for you, but all you can see is your sin. All you can see is your past. And there's a disconnect between what God has called you to and where you are right now.
Through Moses' leadership, the children of Israel are now entering the promised land as a force. They have endured years of hardship in the wilderness, transitioning out of the psychological shackles of servitude in Egypt and into a resilient and fortified nation. After 40 years of ups and downs and twists of fate, the Jewish people are ready to enter the promised land to create a unique national existence that will influence the history of mankind.
Who am I, God, that you would be mindful of me? Who am I that you would use me? Who am I to be a leader? Who am I to be forgiven and loved and accepted? Who am I to start a business, to be an influencer in my world, God? Who am I that you would be mindful of me?